Hi, I'm Julie. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm finally going to get started on this antique buffet that I got at Goodwill for $100. I'm going to refinish it with chalk paint. I'm sure that there are going to be some people who disagree with using paint on an antique, but this piece is in very rough shape, and honestly, I promise it's going to look amazing once I get it finished. So for starters, I will flip the camera around and show you the materials that I've gathered for the project. Okay, here she is. I've already taken one of the drawers out. Over here I have got some of my materials. For starters, we are going to take a blow dryer and melt the candle wax off the top of the buffet. We're just going to melt it and then it'll wipe off really easily. I have sanding blocks for the legs. This is the worst one. It looks like it was chewed by a puppy. This is the top. This is the wax. You could probably sand it off, but it would gum up your sandpaper, so I'm going to try the blow dryer method. This is a hand sander, and I've got 220 grit sandpaper on it. The top doesn't need a ton of sanding. The chalk paint is very forgiving. This is the sandpaper I'm going to use. This is a combo pack. It's got some sheets with 220 grit and some sheets with 320. I'm going to use the 220. It's going to create a nice finish. I've got some vinegar and water. It's just half and half that I'm going to use to clean the remainder. I'm going to clean the buffet after I sand and just make sure all the dirt and grime and dust from the sanding process is gone. I've got paper towels I'm going to use for that. Scissors to cut the sandpaper to fit the sander. This is actually a hand sander with a circular plate on it, but I don't have any of the round sandpaper pads for it, so I'm hoping that this one is going to be fine today. My thing is you have to plug this one in, and this one operates on battery, which is really nice and convenient. And then I have my flathead screwdriver to remove hardware first. I've already removed some of the hardware. These old pieces, antiques, always have flathead screws. So I pretty much knew before I even looked what kind of screwdriver I would need because of the age of this. Look at these beautiful pulls. All right, put your pulls in a safe place so that they don't get lost. In my case, I'm just putting them in this insert. This goes in the top drawer. It's got this pretty blue velvet that holds your silverware and keeps it cushioned. And then I've got my paint. And I know that this looks like it's going to be black, but it's not. I promise it's not going to turn out black. It comes out as a dark navy blue, and it's really pretty. After I paint, I'm going to distress, so I'm probably going to need more sandpaper to distress the piece, and then I have to seal it. And if I don't have any sealer, I'll buy some when I get to that point. It's going to take me more than one day to do this project. And this is the product that I'm going to use on the beautiful poles. I'm going to brighten them up with this antique gold paste wax and then spray them with Mod Podge once this is dry. I'm going to go ahead and get started and make the most of this beautiful day. We're expecting rain, and so I kind of like how all this beautiful sunlight's filtering into my garage. So let's see how much we can get done before it starts raining. I will start with the hairdryer to try to melt the candle wax off the top, wipe it off, and then we'll move straight into sanding the top. the sanding process uncovered even more candle wax. So I'm guessing that people just burned candles on this beautiful piece of furniture but didn't protect the wood from the candle wax. So I'm just gonna hit it one more time with the blow dryer, get the rest of this off, this wax. And if I'm going to continue sanding, I pretty much need to go ahead and change out this and put a fresh sanding piece of sandpaper in this. But honestly, you know, the nice thing about chalk paint is that it's so forgiving and you don't have to have a perfectly sanded piece. It just needs to be nice and roughed up because chalk paint will adhere to pretty much anything. So that's my favorite part about using that type of paint. I just don't love this sander. And my husband actually, when he was getting all this stuff out for me, he said, "You're gonna wanna use this one." But I didn't have pads for it, so I didn't use it. Another thing about this one that's nice is that it collects all of your sawdust in this little bag down here. So I've got sawdust everywhere. I just made do with what I had. I didn't feel like going to Lowe's and getting the round sandpaper pads. I just wanted to get started and make the most of the nice weather this morning. But this thing jumps around a lot, so it kind of acts weird, at least to me. And then right in the middle of when I was sanding, the sandpaper tore in half, which caused it to fly out like this. So I just turned it off, and then I just got a new piece of the sandpaper and just wrapped it around a sanding block and started sanding by hand. Thankfully, it doesn't need a ton of sanding, so I'm pretty much done with the sanding of the top. And then I'm gonna change the camera angle so that you can see the front of the piece of furniture. And I'm gonna start working on the legs, those chewed up legs, by hand. Now that I'm up close and personal, I can see that the drawer fronts are gonna need some light sanding. I'll do that by hand once I take the pulls off. And these little feet on the bottom, they're supposed to have these round pieces on it, but some of them were there and some of them were missing. So I just decided to take all of them off. These two actually popped right off. They look like they were glued. So I'm probably just going to take this little flathead screwdriver and see if I can pop the others off in the same way. Maybe not. Okay, they're not coming off as easy. These two just came right off. Oh goodness, there's some problems down here too. Yeah, thank goodness for paint. So now that you can see all of these details, you can see how difficult it and how much time it would take to actually refinish this. Meaning stripping it, sanding it, and then restaining and revarnishing all of these nooks and crannies. And I mean, that would just be, I'm sure there's someone in this world who could do it, but that person's not me. So paint and light sanding is actually going to solve a ton of the problems on this. So I'm just going to start working on these legs by hand, basically. Well, I've given the whole thing a rough sand, and now I'm just kind of in the process of cleaning all of the sawdust off. And just, you know, in the light of day, in the sunlight, you know, just seeing just all of the issues with this wood. There's places where, you know, varnish is just like chipping off. And of course, there's places that have been chewed by dogs. I guess like originally all of it would have been nice and shiny like this. There's some old contact paper on the inside. I'm leaning towards keeping this, so I might just keep the contact paper and just go over the top with some more, because this side is intact. If I were going to sell it, it has to be to a much higher standard than it has to be if I'm going to keep it. So anyway, now I'm just cleaning, and then the fun part starts, the painting. Well, now that I've got the paint open, you can see that it's already lighter than the color on the can would indicate. It is not going to be very, very dark. It's not like, you know, chalkboard paint black or anything like that. And I'm rusty with all of this whole process. I used to paint furniture a lot. And when I opened my new antique booth in Ellijay, Georgia, I didn't want to have to sell a piece of furniture every single month just to make it. And that's what I was having to do when I had an antique booth in Atlanta. So I'm rusty. I forgot that you really should turn these cans upside down before you remove the top, because they're not mixed at the paint store or anything. They've been sitting on the shelf, and you don't know how long they've been sitting on the shelf. So I'm just stirring it, but ideally I would have turned it over on its head and let it sit upside down for a few minutes before I even opened it. All right, here comes the fun part. Applying the first coat of paint is the fun part. Then we let it dry, then we apply a second coat, then we let that dry, then we distress everything, all of our beautiful details in the wood, and then we seal it. So I'm going to go from top to bottom. I'm going to start at the top. I work my way down, and that's because when paint drips, it drips down. So you can deal with it as it drips. And this paint is, I'm telling you, it is gloriously thick. I love it. You always want to, of course, paint in the direction of your wood grain, as well as sand in the direction of your wood grain. So I should get a smaller brush for this top piece here, but it's okay. If I were going to sell this piece, I would paint the back as well. But like I said, I'm leaning towards keeping this for myself, even though I think it is going to be kind of large in my dining room. If you haven't seen the video of when I picked this thing up at Goodwill, and my thumbnail says, "What have I done?" because when I got it home, it looked so much bigger than it looked in the store. And I thought, and I still think it might be a little bit too big for my dining room, but I'm probably just going to make it work. And because I'm most likely going to keep this piece, it doesn't have to be as perfect as it would have to be if I was going to sell it in my antique booth. Meaning, I'm not going to paint the back, because it's just going to be up against a wall for the rest of its life anyway. This is the fun part, I'm telling you. The sanding, especially the hand sanding, is kind of hard work. I got hungry, I had to go eat lunch. But this is the fun part. I'm going over this spot that was just covered in candle wax, and the paint is just completely taking care of it. Now with chalk paint, you do kind of want to push it in with your brush as opposed to just kind of gliding over. You can buy these fancy brushes that are supposedly made just for chalk paint, But I've found that a lot of those brushes that are made for chalk painting, I'll show you a picture here of what they look like. I just feel like they lose a ton of bristles in my work and it drives me crazy. Ironically, I just lost one. I just like a paintbrush, a normal paintbrush, and I push the paint into the wood. It just helps it adhere. You're asking a lot of this paint by asking it to go over varnish. And so one way that you rectify that is by just gently pushing the paint into the wood. And I lost another bristle. If this keeps happening, I might go in search of a better paintbrush. I told you it wasn't going to be black. You can already see how grayish blue this color is. So there's the first coat on the top. Now I'm just going to kind of wipe it off as I go to make sure there's no remaining sawdust on it and work my way down. Got a second brush. I got a smaller brush. And I still have my large one for my larger surfaces. Oh, no, don't close it. It doesn't have the pulls on it, so it's hard to open it. I had to, once you take your pulls off, it's hard to open the doors. I had to get a pencil and stick it in the hole and open the door that way. Grab my smaller brush and start hitting these beautiful details. And I'm really using that pushing the paint in technique to hit these details. Look at these gorgeous details. So I'm really pushing the paint in because, like I said, the finish is pretty poor in terms of condition. But the paint is just erasing all of these years of hard times. You know, what I'm going to do is these beautiful details, I'm going to distress them with sandpaper to take some of the paint off of it. So I don't want to necessarily go too thick in these spots because, like I said, I'm just going to turn around and remove paint from these details anyway. So, you know, I want it to be completely covered, but not really thick, if that makes sense. If I was going to sell this, I would have taped this right here to make sure I had a perfectly clean line. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to how I do this for somebody else to sell it. But if it's for me, I give myself a little bit more grace and just, you know, freehand things that I would have taped up if I were going to sell it. Look how pretty this color is in the sunlight. You can really see that it's not black. It is just like a beautiful dark bluish gray the way it comes out. And it will continue to be that. It'll be a little bit deeper of a color when the second coat dries, but it's still not going to be black. I just love this color. And after spending tons of money on other brands, I would buy Annie Sloan and Dixie Belle and, oh, I don't know. There's more. I just like Rust-Oleum. I think it's a great value for the money. This leg was in the absolute worst shape of all. And honestly, I'm not sure how you could completely fix that. Other than you could try filling this with wood filler and letting it dry and then sanding over it, which I probably would attempt something like that if I was going to sell this. But considering I'm going to keep this for myself, I'm almost positive, I'm just going to see if the chalk paint will adhere into those spots. If it doesn't turn out okay, I can always sand it again and paint over it again. So I'm just going to push it into these spots where it looks like a dog just went to town on the on the wood, chewing it up. I mean, it doesn't look great, but like I said, I can sand over it and paint over it again as many times as I need to where I'm satisfied with the way it looks. It is on a leg, you know, it's not on the top or anything like that. So it's not like people who come over are going to be inspecting my work and looking really closely at the legs. You know what I mean? I'm the only one who's going to know that it's there. From afar, no one will ever see the fact that this leg has been chewed up by a dog and painted over. I'm kind of surprised, you know, at the price that Goodwill, like, they're clearly training their employees to recognize antiques, but you know, an antique is only valuable if someone wants to buy it, if there's a market for it. And when a piece of furniture is in this condition where it is just, you know, so distressed and so, well, not well taken care of, I'll say it. I think $100 is a little much for this piece from a thrift store. And it's why I didn't immediately buy it the first time I saw it. If it had been $50, I probably would have bought it the first time I saw it. But the fact that it was twice that much is the reason why I went home and thought about this. So yeah, some of the prices at Goodwill are rather shocking sometimes. Even if I were to put this in my booth and put $400 on it or $450 on it when it's done, it would probably sit there for a while, for a few months, maybe 6 months before, you know, it's sold. And once you figure what I paid for it, plus the tax, and then buying the paint, which the Rust-Oleum does save you money, but it was still $26 for the paints. Picked up the paint brushes in a bundle for $4 from Goodwill, which was an awesome find, because paint brushes are not cheap. Then there's sandpaper, and then whatever I'm going to seal it with, which is going to be not polyurethane, because polyurethane will yellow over time, and I don't want anything that's going to possibly affect the color, my paint color. I'm going to use a polyacrylic as opposed to a polyurethane, because I don't want my color to be affected by polyurethane yellowing over time. So if I don't have the polyacrylic in stock, you know, I have to buy that too. So once you really think about it, after I buy the polyacrylic and the paint and the sandpaper, and if you have to buy paint brushes full price, you've got another $100 in materials. So Goodwill, $100 was kind of a lot for this, because it's not like anyone is going to buy it and just plop it right in their dining room the way it is. I mean, it looked it looked really bad. I could see the potential, but it looked really bad. Well, I finished the first coat of paint, so the second coat is pretty much the same as the first. I don't think there's really any need to film the second coat of paint, but I do think I'm going to divide this video up into 2 parts. So the first part was prep work and paint, and part 2 is going to be distress and seal. So since it's such a big project, I think I'm going to divide it up into 2 videos, but I can always put all that together at some point in the future into one longer video of the whole thing. So thank you so much for watching today, and I look forward to seeing you again for part 2.